Hi everyone, Savannah here, and today we're capturing a little jar of summer magic. We'll be sketching glowing fireflies inside a mason jar with soft lighting and dreamy colors. I'm using my free brush set in Procreate. The link's in the description along with the outline and palette if you want to follow along. Let's go ahead and jump in. The first thing we're going to do is start adding in the floor and the ledge here on the left, the step here. So we're going to grab a dark red orange color. We're going to create a new layer in your layers, and then we're going to be using the square brush for this. We are going to start with filling in the shapes here, just outlining them and then filling them in with the same color. We will add details as we continue on here towards the end, but let's go ahead and just fill that shape again using that square brush on a new layer, and that layer is below the template layer so that you can still see the general shape of where you're trying to fill in. And if you want to do straight lines like I am doing here, all you need to do is drag the pencil across the screen, hold that pencil down, don't lift it up, and that line should snap into a straight line. And then you can move it around after that point, depending on what angle you want to do. You can also do it so that it's parallel to the edge of the page. So to do that, you just draw that straight line. Again, hold that pencil down until it turns in a straight line, but this time hold a finger down on the screen as well, and that will snap it to either these horizontal lines or vertical lines, depending on where you do that shape. But if you're just looking for a straight line that you can auto adjust, just hold down that pencil, like I mentioned, without lifting, and eventually it'll snap that into a straight line for you. Now create a new layer. We're going to bring that down below this layer that we just filled in. And we're going to start adding in the background here. So we're going to start with a really dark blue color. I'm going to make it dark towards the top right. And then also go a little bit lighter towards the bottom left there because of the glow of the jar. I want it to be brighter towards the jar. So the top right is going to be dark. And then I also added dark to the bottom here as well. And with that circle blend brush, you see that I just selected that. We're going to grab a medium blue color and we're going to add that here to the background, just in the upper part of the background. Again, I'm going dark blue from the top right to a lighter blue. So I'm grabbing this lightest blue to go in the bottom left here. And then we will work on blending it out. So still using that circle blend brush, I increase the size of that brush and I'm just very lightly blending these colors out. And now I'm also grabbing some colors that are in between. As you add in the colors with that circle blend brush, you will start getting this blended kind of area because it's pressure sensitive. So you can do lighter presses and it's going to blend those colors very nicely. To grab these kind of in between blended colors to blend it out even further, you just hold your finger down on the screen where you want that specific color, and then in the top right you'll see the color that's currently selected. It should change to that new color, and then you can start using that to blend these two colors. So when you're going from a really dark color to a lighter color, it helps pretty well when you have a blended color in between, and you can use that to blend between those two colors even further. And then just every so often, make sure you turn that outline layer off so that you can see how everything's starting to look. It's a little too light in the top right, so I'm just grabbing a little bit more of this dark color to bring down because I got a little bit carried away there with the lighter color. So I'm bringing a little bit of that darkness down, but then we'll move on to the next step after this. So now we're going to add some detail to the deck here in this step here. Originally I was going to work on the plants, but I'm going to save that for a little bit later. So to work on the step here, I'm going to grab this light brown color at the bottom, and I'm going to grab that square blend brush. Now on that same layer as the brown step and the deck that we created, we're going to start adding in this light brown color where the mason jar is going to be. I forgot to put this on that original layer, so I'm going to go do that real quick. And also make sure you set that layer to alpha lock. The reason we want to do alpha lock is as we are adding in these details, it's going to be confined to the shape that we create. It's not going to go outside those lines. So again, we're just gonna be adding in some color. I have this kind of grayish blue color I'm adding on the left. That's kind of in the shadows, so I wanted to be a little bit more of a cool tone. So that's why I'm adding this gray color. And we're just gonna keep building up colors on these steps here, just various different browns. We'll pull in some various different blues, but we're just gonna start blending it, still using that square blend brush, because that will kind of give it that nice look of almost like a wood deck that we want to get. And so we're just going to keep using that square blend brush and keep building up colors here on this deck and step. And then just be mindful of where the lighter tone should be. So I did very light color in front of the step here because the fireflies are going to kind of cast a glow on it. Same with the front of the step there. Underneath, I kept it a little bit lighter. And then I will also add a little bit of lighter coloring right underneath the mason jar because again, all that glow is going to be brightening up these areas. So I want to make sure that they are bright. And I'm just again adding in some various different colors. So I added some orange because I think that will pair really nicely with the glow from the fireflies. I'm adding a very dark strip underneath here to just distinguish that this is a step. So there's going to be that shadow underneath here, but that's the only area that I added shadow for that step because again, there's going to be a little bit of that glow from the fireflies. And then for other details for the side here, so a lot of the side edge, you can use the other brushes. So I'm using the circle brush right now just to add in some of that detail, and then I'll go over it with one of the blend brushes, either the circle blend or the square blend, just to give it a little bit of color variation from the other areas. I wanted this color to be a little bit darker, so I did originally pick the dark red color, but I'm gonna go a little darker, which I'll click into the disc and do because I don't feel like it is distinguished enough from that shadow underneath the step here. So I wanted to make it look a little bit different, a little bit darker. So that's where I added in that color. And then same with the side of the step here. I want it to be a little bit darker because it was still blending in with the colors that we have. So I just went to the disc and grabbed a darker color for the side here. And I'm turning that outline layer off every so often because I want to make sure that the lines are crisp. It looks like a step here is not blending in with each other. So that's what I'm kind of doing. And then I'm using this orange, just kind of give it a little bit of color variation on the side, using that circle blend brush there for that, just to give it some texture so it doesn't look just one solid color. Then again, I'm grabbing in some of these cooler tones and I'm going to start adding in some, just some color variation here. So I went cooler on top again, just to kind of distinguish that it's not getting lit by the fireflies. And so I want it to be a little bit cooler. There might be a little bit of light coming up on there, but for the most part, it's going to be in a cooler area because it's not going to be lit up as bright like the front of the step here. So kind of really want to play with the contrast. Shadows, things like that are usually more cool toned. Things that are in the light, they're brighter in more like yellows and things like that. And so that's why I'm kind of playing with the color here to make it a little bit more distinguished. Then I'm also going to grab this very dark color and I'm going to make it dark right inside here, as if that's kind of like the entrance into wherever it is that the step is going into. Maybe it's a home, wherever it is, but I want to make it to be dark stepping into there. And again, I always turn off that outline layer so that I can see how my shapes are holding up, if I need to tweak anything, if I need to define those edges better or not. But now I am working on just adding in a little bit of details on this right side here. I'm not going super detailed. I'm just kind of giving it the impression that there is a step here, that there's a deck here, without going into too many details. And then to give some texture and dimension to the deck here, I grabbed that grayish green blue color from the color palette, and that square blend brush. And I'm just adding in some detail here, doing kind of light brush strokes because again, this is a pressure sensitive brush. So you don't have to press too hard to get that pigment on the page. But if you want to go harder, you just press harder and you'll get more of that pigment. But I wanted to kind of do these light brush strokes because it still kind of looks a little bit like wood, like grain, and that's the kind of the style and the texture I was trying to go for here. So I'm just building up layers. I grabbed that light brown color that we used on the front of the step. I'm grabbing some mid-tone browns just to blend these colors out a little bit more. And I'm just going to keep building up the deck here with these various different colors. And then to make it look like wood, I used that original color we used, that dark bluish, greenish gray color. And I am using that square blend brush. I'm just drawing kind of these lines across the surface to make it look like the planks. And then I did at the base of the step here just to give it that final shadow to make it look distinct because it was kind of blending into each other. Now I am going to work on the plant, so I just grabbed a green color. I didn't actually include a good green color in the color palette, so just grab whichever green color you want. We have a plant here kind of on the corner of the step here, almost like a mossy plant that kind of is growing in the cracks. And then a plant in the front here, I just added just a little bit of variation to give it some interest to this page. So just go ahead and trace that, fill it in, and then we'll work on adding some details. Now let's go ahead and lighten some of these areas up. So set that layer to alpha lock, grab a lighter green, the circle blend brush, and just start adding in some lightness. Again, focused on where that light's going to be hitting from these fireflies. So more towards the edge, like in the front plant here, more towards the top edge there. And then on the plant by the step, it's going to be to the right. And then I'm also grabbing a few of the in-between colors here to blend these areas out a little bit more. And then I'm going to go back over with a darker green just to bring those shadows up because I feel like it's getting a little too muted for this plant. And I'm adding all of these colors still using that circle blend brush. It goes really well because again you can play with the intensity of that color, but I'm using this for adding in those details, and I use this a lot in my videos for adding in details. And just keep going back and forth with these colors until you start getting the plants to look how you want them to look. I did grab one other color just to bring in a little bit more um, brightness to it. It was looking a little bit muted, so I want to bring a little bit more of this green brightness to it. So now that I've had that added in, I'm liking how this looks. So let's go ahead and pivot into the jar. We are going to use that dark grayish blue green color, and I'm going to use the circle blend brush for this. The blend brush works really nicely when you want to add in any glass textures or any glass surfaces in your drawings. I have done a couple different videos now. I've actually done a mason jar with a moon inside of it, similar to this, where it's glowing, so you can kind of follow that process as well. And I've done another couple other videos where it's kind of the glass texture, but the circle blend brush is really nice. It gives you the soft kind of edging that you want for glass, where you still can kind of see through it, but there's still a little bit of dimension for you to understand that there is something there. So what I'm doing now, after I've kind of traced the edge of the mason jar here, I'm just bringing that color very lightly onto the surface here of the mason jar, and I'm also going to grab this whitish yellow color just to build some dimension to it. I am going to erase some of this, and you'll see as I add in the fireflies what I mean by that, but I will erase some of the surfaces here, but I want to give it a little bit of a sheen kind of on the surface. And then I'm going to use that same yellowish white color and adding a few spots here and there just to give it more definition, like there is something kind of glowing off of this, that it's glass, it has that reflective surface, and so that's what I'm kind of doing here. And then I am going to grab kind of a grayish cyan color just to give it one more kind of color here. So again, going around the edges, you don't have to trace every single edge. I'm just kind of roughly going over some of the edges in areas where I think that it needs to be lightened a little bit. But once you have that done, then we can work on adding in the fireflies. So go ahead and create a new layer underneath that mason jar layer. Grab the orange color from the color palette, and then the circle brush. We're just going to add in some fireflies to the bottom here. And I did do this layer below the mason jar because I want these fireflies to feel like they're inside of that mason jar. I will also do a layer on top for the fireflies that are on the outside. Now I did duplicate this layer, so you swipe left and duplicate, but I did end up doing something slightly different later in this. So you can follow this step if you want to, but I ended up redoing this portion. Essentially what I did was I filled that layer with the yellow color. I picked a different blend mode, and then I did a Gaussian blur on it. I wasn't liking how it was looking, so again, I will change that towards the end. This is kind of the approach I did at first. And then when I started adding in the other fireflies, I didn't like how it was looking. So you can follow this step if you want to, or you can skip ahead and see how I do the rest of these sections um, here in a second. But again, this is kind of where I was going with it at first, and it just was not giving me that glowy look that I was wanting. Now, this part coming up is where you can start over if you follow along this. So I added in the fireflies now. So I grabbed that orange color again, still using that circle brush, and I'm just adding in on a new layer the fireflies. Now, this new layer is still underneath the mason jar layer because I wanted these to be inside. And then I had a few kind of coming outside of the jar here. And then what I did after this is created another new layer, this time on top of the mason jar for fireflies that were outside of the jar. And now I'm just working on these fireflies on the outside. You can copy where I place them on the template if you want, or you can place them where you want. You don't have to be exact. I was just kind of giving you that idea. Now on the layer, swipe left to duplicate and then click that layer above, set to alpha lock, grab that light yellow color and then click the layer again and click fill layer. Turn alpha lock off, and then we're going to do a Gaussian blur. Now, this is the method that I use going forward for the glow. So you can delete those original glowy layers that I created for the inside of the mason jar. But again, this is the style that I did. So on anything that is firefly, I did the same thing. I duplicated the original layer, set it to alpha lock, filled it with that light yellow white color, turn the alpha lock off, and then did a Gaussian blur. I did that for all of the glowy bits here because it made it look a little bit better. And I also actually added one more layer here. I did a yellow in between the white and the orange. And you can go as glowy as you want with this Gaussian blur. I went a little bit more glowy with it, but here you'll see I duplicated all of those white layers and then I set it to alpha lock. I grabbed that yellow color and then I set fill layer. So again, I wanted to bring a little bit of yellow glowiness to it. So I did this for all of the firefly layers, added a layer in between the white and the orange, set it to yellow, and then it kind of gave it a little bit more of a kind of yellow glow. It was a little too white for me once I add the white, but this kind of gives it a nice contrast. Now, one of the last things we're going to do is change the blend modes for everything. So on the white layer, I ended up using the screen for the white layer and then add for the yellow layer because it kind of gave it that nice glow. You can play around with these in whichever options that you want to pick. I just happen to like the looks of these two options, and so that's what I went with. So on the white layers, I did screen. On the yellow layers, I did add because it gave me that really bright, beautiful glow that I was looking for. Now, I mentioned earlier that I was going to erase a little bit of the mason jar, so I'm using the soft brush, so just standard brush in Procreate. But I'm using a soft brush to just erase a little bit of the mason jar because it's getting a little too dark, a little too cloudy, and made the fireflies look a little dirty, kind of a grayish dirty. And so I wanted to lighten it up a little bit. And then I brought that size down and I erased where the fireflies were. You could have done the fireflies on top of the mason jar layer, but I still wanted a little bit of the mason jar to be on top. So right now I'm just kind of erasing just a little bit around the fireflies so that you can see their glowiness without that muddy color, but I still want a little bit of that mason jar presence. And now one last thing that I did on top of the floor here, I added a new layer. I set it to clipping mask because I wanted to confine to that space. And I did the same steps that I did for the fireflies, except for I used a soft brush for this. So I grabbed that orange, added a little bit of a soft glow to the bottom here where the mason jar is sitting. I did the same thing, so I duplicated that layer, set the middle layer to the yellow color, and then the top layer to the white yellow color, and then I changed the blend mode. So again, the white blend mode, I set it to screen. The yellow blend mode, I set it to add. And then I also ended up changing the opacity. So to change it, you just click into the opacity there. And to change the blend mode, you just click the N that's next to it, and that will bring up those blend modes. But to change the opacity, you also click into that, and it'll bring up the opacity slider. And I brought them down to about 50% because they were very glowy. I didn't want them to be as glowy as the fireflies, but I still wanted to be a very bright glow from the fireflies on the surface here. And with that, our image is done. I hope this firefly sketch brought a little calm and wonder to your day. If you liked it, be sure to like and subscribe, and feel free to grab the free template and palette on Patreon. Thanks for drawing with me, and I'll see you in the next sketch.